I'll start by giving a quick overview of what I'll be talking about today, which is a tech radar. What is a tech radar? Why should you care about it, and how could you go about building one? So, give you a quick overview of who I am. First of all, so I'm Richard Brown. I'm the technical director of Audacia. So I have a background in software engineering for kind of past 15 or 20 years. Worked as a kind of back-end engineer, full-stack engineer at a variety of places. Been at Audacia for 6 years, head of engineering initially, and then technical director for the last couple of years. So I'm responsible for Audacia's technical direction, our technical standards, technical strategies, kind of what we're doing as a company, what's our technical direction, how are we kind of pushing the boundaries as a software consultancy to help our clients deliver the best software, best systems that they can. One of the tools that we use is a technology radar, so that's what we're talking about today. So let's dive in, shall we? So first of all, what are tech radars? I'd like to explain. If people have never come across them before, I'll kind of give a bit of a high level as to what they are, where they came from. I'll show you some examples, both from Audacia and from elsewhere in the industry. Different people use them in different ways. How we use them is potentially it's a bit different to how some other companies use them. So we'll talk about the different use cases, different benefits you might get from them. I'll explain. I'm going to kind of dig into, as far as Audacia is concerned, why do we have a tech radar? What are the benefits for us? How do we run that day to day? How does it affect our day-to-day operations? And we'll finish with a few kind of tips and tricks. We've kind of gone through the journey of implementing a tech radar. What have we learned from that? What have been the issues that we've encountered? How have we overcome them? What are the real key enablers to getting the best out of the tech radar? Like I said in the intro, there is a Q&A, so please do pop any questions that you have in the Q&A. I'll try and keep an eye on that as we're going along, but we'll kind of come back to them at the end as well in case anyone has any questions. So first of all, then, what is a tech radar? So I guess the tech bit, the technology bit, is fairly clear. It's something to do with technology, how we describe technology, and then the radar bit is again fairly self-explanatory, but may not kind of without seeing it, may not make a huge amount of sense. But it's a way of visually representing technology's kind of maturity or adoption within either an organisation or within the wider industry. Like I say, it'll be clearer when you see it, but yeah, it's a way of kind of visualising kind of different technologies and where they are on that kind of journey between, brand new bleeding edge to should be adopted by everyone, and then almost kind of back out the other way of, well, this is now kind of legacy or deprecated and no longer recommended. So you can kind of visualize how a technology can kind of go through those different phases, and you can get a kind of snapshot of, right, at this current point in time, what we're recommending people use, where are we kind of investigating the next, maybe the next generation of technologies, and then maybe what's kind of, being deprecated or things that we should be starting to move away from. There are kind of two main aspects to it in terms of the structure. There are kind of different segments, so different ways of categorizing technologies. So programming languages or frameworks might be a particular category, or database technologies, cloud technologies, just whatever works for you really. We'll talk about that more later. But that's kind of one way of structuring it in those kind of segments or categories. The other way is using rings. So that's a way of representing how mature the technology is. The closer to the center, the more mature it is, and the further out would usually either mean it's not quite reached maturity yet, or maybe it's a little bit kind of over the hill, so to speak. So maybe something to move away from. A tech radar is definitely not something to just write once and fire away. It's got to be a living, breathing thing. It's got to kind of represent what is the current state of affairs, what are the current recommendations. In terms of its use within either a business or within a kind of wider kind of ecosystem or industry, it can really be used to drive that kind of strategic decision making, drive that kind of what is our technical direction, those kind of questions. By looking at what we're using, what's coming next, what's the next wave, it really helps to kind of understand, well, where should we be hiring next maybe, or where should we be investing in kind of training or upskilling for our staff. By keeping it up to date, it also kind of, to some extent, kind of forces those kind of conversations as well. You're constantly having to revisit, well, what is our recommended tech stack? It's very difficult to just let things drift. If you're actively keeping on top of it, you kind of got to keep up to date with, well, what's the roadmap for this framework? Is it where they're looking to get to in the next couple of years? Is that going to align with where we're looking to be? Maybe they're kind of looking to move in a direction that's not really where we're looking, so maybe we should be looking to trial or adopt something else in its place. So it really helps to kind of inform a lot of those kind of conversations. Otherwise, it is very, very easy as a kind of company or an industry to kind of, well, we've got our tool of choice, let's just stick with it. And it doesn't kind of, really doesn't allow that to happen. And then it is, managing risk is something that, if I talk to technology leaders, like what keeps them up at night, a lot of the times it's risk and how to keep on top of it, how to manage it effectively. Having a tech radar really allows that risk to be kind of surfaced and managed in a much more active way. So let's say you've got technology that is changing its licensing terms. So an example from relatively recently, Terraform kind of changed how they were licensing that product. So maybe that's going to introduce a risk to your organization. If Terraform is still on your tech radar, then you'll be regularly revisiting that and keeping up to date with what's going on. So first of all, you'll be made aware, there's this licensing change coming up. You're then kind of having those conversations. You can then adjust where it is on the tech radar. Maybe you weren't using it and now you're saying, actually don't use this. You're immediately then surfacing that to the rest of the organization. And so it's immediately visible to anyone making a choice on an infrastructure as code tool. Again, to use Terraform as the example. Well, maybe Terraform is something we should avoid. Maybe we should now be moving to CloudFormation or Pulumi or Azure Bicep, whatever kind of platform you're running on. So yeah, really kind of allowing you to surface that risk, to manage that risk, and to kind of make that risk visible to other people in your organisation is really powerful. That's what a tech radar is. I kind of talked a lot about it without a visual and to kind of back it up. So this is an example of a tech radar. So tech radars really were kind of, they came from ThoughtWorks. ThoughtWorks were the people who initiated the idea, they've popularized it, they still publish a tech radar a few times a year. So this is I think the latest tech radar. It doesn't show the kind of full thing. You go to the link is there on the slide, you can go to the website, you can see it. Each of these numbers will correspond to a particular technology. So you can see, as far as ThoughtWorks are concerned, they've defined kind of what the four quadrants, the four segments that are important to them: techniques, tools, languages and frameworks, platforms. So that's how they're kind of categorizing things, and that's what's important to them. You can see the rings that they've got. They've got 4 rings kind of moving inwards: hold, assess, trial, adopt. Hopefully all self-explanatory. So hold means kind of hold off using it, and that might be, this is brand new, bleeding edge. We just, we want to see where it's going before we do anything with it yet. It might also mean it's actually kind of on the way out, done. We were recommending this a year ago, just hold off using it now because it looks like it's, looks like it's on the way out. Maybe licensing terms have changed, maybe there's been some kind of acquisition, maybe it's an open source project and the maintainer is kind of, has moved on, or there's some other reason to not. Maybe there's just something else has come out that's superseded it. So they start with that kind of the hold ring. Assess would then be the next level of maturity. So it's no longer kind of bleeding edge. It's now something that we want to start more actively looking at. So maybe this is where you're running a really, really limited kind of proof of concept. Maybe you're just having some initial calls with a vendor to work out, well, what's the pricing structure or the licensing terms. Then moving into trials where it's then becoming more actively used. So this might be where you move from that kind of prototype proof of concept phase into we're now going we're going to run a trial on a project. So it's being used in a kind of real delivery, in a kind of delivery project, but you're not necessarily recommending it to be used more widely than that. You're still kind of trialing how it stands up to maybe what other technologies you are using. And assuming a trial is successful, it's just kind of worth mentioning that something could stop at any one of these rings. You may stop something at assess because it's actually not going to pan out. You may run a trial and the trial doesn't work out. The tool just isn't what we wanted it to be, in which case you would back that one out. But assuming a successful trial, you may then say, right, we are now recommending this as our tool or technology of choice for use case X, and then you move into the adoptering. And then most things will spend a bit of time in the adoptering. The journey from there is an interesting one. It might then move back to hold because actually we tried adopting it more widely and something's happened, something's changed, something else has come along, we're no longer kind of recommending it. Sometimes things will just they'll spend some time and adopt, and then they'll just become such a kind of the default choice that you kind of don't even need to represent it. So, going back, I don't know, 10 years, whatever it was, things like React were coming out, the now widely popular single page app kind of frameworks. One time you may have had React or Vue or something in the adoptering, it's probably not worth telling people that they should adopt React. Like, that's just such a default choice. So, sometimes things will just kind of get so embedded within your organization or within the industry that you can, you no longer need to kind of represent it. Something may then come back in, like say in a couple of years React actually just massively loses popularity, people move away to something kind of slightly different, slightly better. You may then want to reintroduce React into the whole ring just so there's a representation there of actually this is something we're not recommending to be used anymore. So that's ThoughtWorks. So like I say, ThoughtWorks came up with the idea, they popularized it. Lots of people have now kind of adopted tech radars of their own for their own purposes. So I've got a couple that I'm going to show and just talk through really, really quickly. And then I'll go through Audacia's tech radar. So Zalando are a German, big German online kind of fashion platform. So they've got their own. So, their quadrants are different. They're not using the kind of platforms, languages, frameworks, etc. So I think you can kind of go onto it's on their website. There's various sort of blog posts and so on that have kind of explained some other examples of tech radars as well. I think the next one's a really interesting one because they've kind of moved away. They're not in the kind of quadrant. They're not 4. They've gone with 6, and theirs are very, very different. So this is a firm called Software AG. And their 6 segments are connected customer experience, digital business excellence, ecosystem-driven economy, hybrid multi-cloud infrastructure, agile DevOps, continuous delivery, and then platform-enabled ecosystem. So some of those are kind of not, connected customer experience and digital business excellence, kind of not very tangible things. They're not talking about languages, they're not talking about frameworks and tools. They're almost talking about things that enable a certain thing to happen or a certain concept to be in place. So, so they've approached it in a very, very different way, but obviously in a way that really, really works for them. And you can see they're also in the kind of key at the bottom of the radar there. They're also kind of using what we call blips. So basically each item on the radar is called a blip. So they're using each blip on the radar or the size of each blip to kind of further represent some kind of concept. So in this case, it's relevance for a truly connected world. So in a way, the bigger the blip, the bigger the relevance, the more core that is to this kind of connected world. So obviously, this is they've kind of taken they haven't really taken the ThoughtWorks radar as a template and used that. They've taken that kind of concept, they've moved it to a higher level. They've started with a concept and then they've kind of reimagined it in a way that works for them. So I think that's a really good example of somebody who's just thought beyond the obvious. They've thought beyond what ThoughtWorks are doing and they've kind of reimagined it to something that like I say, works really well for them. So I think, yeah, that's definitely if somebody is thinking about, well, does this work for me and my organisation? I think it can work for anyone. You just need to kind of think about it in maybe a slightly different way. So I'm now going to just talk about Audacia's Tech Radar. So this is a kind of snapshot of what it looks like. And if there's time at the end, I will bring up our kind of website that has it. So you can see we've kind of gone with a similar kind of structure as ThoughtWorks. We've got quadrants, we've got the rings. In this case, we've just got 3 rings. So I'll explain why we've made it slightly different. I'll explain why we've chosen these quadrants in particular, and then I'll talk through in a little bit more detail, kind of what we get out of it and how we manage it. So as you can see in the bottom right corner, we've got 4 segments: data and AI, cloud and DevOps, test engineering, software engineering. So if you were to go on our website, you would see that there are 4 core services that we offer, which are engineering, cloud, data, AI. So we have these 4 kind of service pillars that we offer. And so I guess the obvious thing would have been to align the quadrants directly with those. So we would have had a quadrant per service pillar. The reason we haven't done that is because I guess the main thing we've done is we've combined data and AI into a single quadrant, and then we've split engineering out into test engineering and software engineering. So there are 2 main reasons for that. One is engineering is the kind of biggest aspect of what we do. You know, most of our projects are software engineering projects. There are more tools and technologies that we use in the engineering space purely because there's more activity there, there's more people working in those areas. And so splitting it out between software engineering and test engineering was a fairly natural way to split that. You know, two main roles, 2 main kind of sets of people we employ are test engineers and software engineers. And then the reason to then combine data and AI is because they do kind of quite naturally fit together. You know, most of the people we employ in that area are data scientists. So they're doing a huge amount with AI, they're building kind of machine learning models and so on, but they're also doing a lot with data, and they've got the word data in their job title. So data and AI just fit very, very, very naturally together, and some of the tools that are used kind of cross over those two areas in a much more obvious way than maybe some of the other ones do. And I guess the other slight tweak we've done is that we've thrown DevOps in with cloud. So what we wanted to represent was, if we take a software engineering kind of project, we effectively kind of, you know, source code software kind of goes in various cycles. So software engineer writes the code. Well, that is all governed by what's in the software engineering quadrant. Test engineer then does some kind of testing, automated testing, manual testing, etc. Those things fall into that test engineering quadrant. The software itself needs to get from, ultimately needs to get from a software engineer's laptop, so they need to commit to source control somehow. That software needs to be compiled, deployed, and needs to run in usually some kind of cloud infrastructure. So how that software gets built, deployed, and actually runs in the cloud, all then covered by that kind of cloud and DevOps quadrant. So, things like CI/CD pipelines, GitHub Actions, Azure pipelines, things like that. All those kind of technologies will be covered within that quadrant. The other slight tweak that we've done to the ThoughtWorks radar, so ThoughtWorks had, I think, hold, assess, trial, use. We've tweaked some of the wording, we've combined some of the rings just because it simplified it a little bit and made a little bit more sense for us. So first of all, the outer ring we've called a void. It just seems slightly clearer to us. Hold is a kind of, I don't know, didn't feel as clear, it just felt a little bit ambiguous about how I'm supposed to interpret this. A void is very clear, like, don't use this, whatever the reason is, don't use it. We'll add a narrative within each blip as to why it should be avoided. We then effectively combine the assess and trial rings just into trial, because I think for us, once we decide we want to use something, we're we're not going to spend a lot of time kind of researching or assessing a tool. We're probably going to trial it quite quickly. I guess for ThoughtWorks as an industry leader, the purpose of the ThoughtWorks technology radar is really to inform the industry as to where they see it going. They are naturally going to spend more time kind of, assessing things or recommending that people just kind of, do something slightly shorter of a trial. The main purpose of our radar is for internal use. It's to inform individuals within the business, where are we going, what are we using. So, for us, just having a single trial ring made a lot of sense, because it's just telling people, we're looking into this, we're kind of actively running a prototype or something, or somebody's doing a bit of research on it. Kind of doesn't really matter what the extent of that trial is. Again, within each blip, we will usually add a bit of narrative that says, this is where we're using it, this is how we're using it, this is who to speak to if you've got any questions. And then the use ring is obviously just things that are being used in production, or that we would, very, very clearly recommend that people use. So that's what our radar looks like. So why do we have a radar? And I think as a consultancy, there are it's maybe a little bit different for us, but there are some very, very clear reasons linked to the fact that we are a consultancy that provide us with huge benefits. So the knowledge sharing aspect, I think, it's definitely relevant to a consultancy. It's probably relevant to any kind of largish company. Any company where you've got different teams working on kind of different, potentially unrelated projects, having some visibility of what technologies are being used within the organisation is really, really useful. So within a consultancy, we'll be working for many different clients at any one time. So each kind of delivery team will be focused on their work for their clients, using obviously a certain tech stack, obviously trying new things all the time. It can be quite hard for the knowledge to kind of break out of that team and into a team working with a totally different client in a totally different tech stack. So having this kind of centralized, visibility of what technologies are we using really allows that knowledge sharing to happen in a fairly kind of seamless way. Obviously, you still want people to be having conversations. There are other mechanisms that we have for doing this kind of knowledge share, but the tech radar is a really, really easy way to just very, very quickly show people what's happening, who's using what we're recommending, what's coming next. I guess 2 and 3 are kind of opposite ends of the spectrum. So avoiding deprecated technologies is, it can be very, very easy for, again, especially if you've got, different projects that are kind of not necessarily, kind of in different areas or wouldn't naturally kind of be communicating all the time. For one project to discover, oh, this library's been deprecated, or an announcement comes out, this thing's not being maintained anymore, or there's some vulnerability being discovered with a certain platform, and we shouldn't use it anymore. So be able to kind of very, very easily represent, please don't use this, is useful, because it's often, if a particular technology becomes deprecated, it's often very, very easy at the time to communicate, please stop using this. You can send a message out, you can get people in a meeting, you can do it via email, newsletters, all kinds of ways exist. So to say, this platform is no longer being supported, please move away from it and use X instead. In a couple of months, you start a new project and, somebody missed the message, or somebody new has joined the company and they're not quite in the loop. Where do they go to know, well, this has been deprecated? Unless they're trawling through the history of messages or emails, this is just a one-stop shop of starting a new project. All right, that's been deprecated, I won't use that. This is now being recommended instead. Let's pick this library. So it's avoiding those kind of deprecated technologies, because what comes with kind of deprecation obviously is things like security vulnerabilities, which obviously everyone wants to avoid. And then the other end of the spectrum is the not what's been deprecated, but what's coming next, that visibility of where we're going as a company, what is our technical direction. You should be able to kind of see from, what's in use and what's in trial, kind of where we're going. new things coming into trial that we're investigating, or maybe in 6 months' time they'll be in use. So providing then, information about it's been trialed on this project by this person enables those conversations to happen. So maybe somebody else spots that, says, how are you finding it? Is it worth me looking into it? And I say, yeah, it's been really promising so far. Why don't you use it? And then you can just kind of quite organically extend that kind of trial period until you've got, a real groundswell of people using something, and then you can recommend that it's used. And then kind of last thing from me is just some kind of tips about what we've learned from implementing a tech radar, either from kind of research or just from actually doing it. So I think the first one, and hopefully this has come across by the different kinds of tech radars I've been able to show you, but don't just go with what ThoughtWorks or whatever other examples you've seen. Don't just go with how they're using it. Customize it to fit your business. Every organization, every industry will have slightly different needs and slightly different priorities. As I've explained why we chose the quadrants that we chose. They worked for us because they're our service offerings. If your service offerings are something different, if you're a data engineering company, maybe all of your quadrants will be something around data engineering because that's what you do. There's no point in you having something about, I don't know, UX or whatever it happens to be. But if your organisation is doing what kind of user-centered design, user interface design, then maybe kind of having a couple of quadrants to represent that is going to be more beneficial for you. So yeah, do customize it and do what works for you. Don't necessarily kind of follow what other people are doing. Keeping it regularly updated. So I said at the start, this can't just be a static thing that's just done once, saved somewhere, and nobody ever kind of looks at again. You've got to regularly update it. You've got to keep it up to date with what's happening in the wider industry. More than anything else, you've got to then communicate those changes kind of proactively. I wouldn't necessarily rely on the fact that people are going to seek out your radar every time they need to make a decision. If something is changing, something quite important is changing, change it on the radar, but have some other means to kind of push that change out to people as well, just in case they're not kind of checking in as regularly. If something is being deprecated for a good reason, then whether it's in a regular newsletter, some kind of town hall or hands meeting that you have every month, just kind of communicate it out. This has been changed on the radar, but just as an FYI, please stop using this library. This is what we're now recommending instead. And then work with people to get them a roadmap to move off whatever you're recommending. And then to kind of seek feedback. So, as a technology leader, so ultimately I'm responsible for keeping the tech radar up to date. I cannot do that by myself. There aren't enough hours in the day for me to just keep on top of all of these things. So, it might be that a particular segment is you can kind of delegate responsibility to another team within the business because they look after that area, so they can kind of maintain that particular segment. You also want to get feedback from as many people as possible. Though everyone in your organisation will be using technology day to day, will be reading blogs, will be listening to podcasts. Everyone will have an opinion. So our Tech Radar has a little button at the top to submit feedback. So you can submit, I think we should add this technology, or I think we should move this or remove this, or even I think we should add this new feature to the radar itself. It's the web app at the end of the day, so it can be tweaked to suit those purposes. But yeah, definitely provide a mechanism for people to really easily feedback. You want to lower that barrier of entry to people actually contributing, because that's how you get engagement. If somebody is actively contributing to your tech radar, they are much more likely to then consult it when they need to make a decision. So yeah, get people engaged in whatever way you can. So that's all I kind of want to talk about. So I'm just going to check the questions very, very quickly. So I've got a couple of questions, which is good. So yeah, there's a question around deprecation of a technology. So it's really around kind of how long things stick around on the radar. So yeah, it's basically if you deprecate technology, you want to move it to your avoid or your outer ring. Would it stay there forever? Would you eventually kind of drop it off? And yeah, it's a really good point. It's sometimes a difficult one to kind of measure. How long do you want to keep something around before it drops off? So there isn't a right answer. There isn't a kind of definite single answer. I think it definitely depends on the use case. I think a couple of things you want to look at is you want to look at how widely it was used or is used within your company. If it was something that you just trialed for a little bit and then you decided it wasn't working out and you moved it back to avoid, you could probably drop that off a bit more quickly because it never really got kind of embedded. If it's something that used to be your go-to choice for something or other, you probably want to keep it around in avoid for a bit longer because it's, I guess, yeah, you'll probably have existing code bases that use it or something and people will come across it in the day-to-day. So you want to have a more, longer-term representation of where it sits. So yeah, there's a couple more. So there's one around kind of licensing costs. This is a really interesting, a really good question around taking into account licensing cost changes. So basically, do you move something to avoid if costs go up massively, or are things placed on the radar on a purely kind of technical basis? I can only speak for our organisation in particular, but licensing costs will definitely be taken into account. So let's just take a really extreme example that we use. We use Angular as one of our front-end frameworks. Let's just say, for argument's sake, not that they would do this, but an extreme example as a just as a kind of use case. Let's say Google decide that Angular is going to become a paid-for product. They're going to add some kind of licensing cost in there, and that's just going to apply going forward. And if you don't pay licensing costs, you're not going to get the new versions with the security patches and so on. I think we will very quickly move that to avoid because other alternatives like Vue and React exist. So why would we continue using Angular? Because for us, its representation is as an engineer, as a data scientist, as a kind of cloud engineer, whatever. It's to inform people's choices. And one of the deciding factors has to be cost, because nobody has kind of infinitely deep pockets. So really good question. But yes, licensing costs or any kind of licensing restrictions would definitely play a part. And then there's another question around what kind of tools have we used to create our radar? So this is a really good one. So this is where I'm gonna kind of jump out. I think you can hopefully see that. Hopefully I've shared my entire screen. So this is our tech radar. This is a web app. So it was created by one of our UI engineers. It is using, I think it's kind of built in Vue or kind of Nuxt and Vue as the kind of technology. It actually uses, as a kind of back-end data store API, it uses GridForce, which is a no-code tool that we built, which just allows us to kind of store the data in a really, really flexible way. And it provides an API to allow us to kind of pull that data in ad hoc. So you've got, this is what it looks like for us. This is our kind of full list. We've got a bit of search, so I can see, where is Angular in there? Yeah, it is. There's a particular Angular library. It's kind of a fuzzy search, so it's pulling in some of the things as well. So then we've got the different quadrants that you can filter by. So this is what ours look like. Works really well for us, and then you can kind of dig into any one of the blips. So you can see what this one is. So this is it's a particular client library for authentication. And then we can have a look at some detail, and it tells you what you use it for, why it's recommended. And then we've got some, these are just kind of external links, so we can hook it into our Microsoft 365 kind of Copilot and search to kind of have a look for instances of this within our organization. We can link through to a particular kind of a particular ticket or a work item where we maybe do some research on this or maybe do some proof of concepting so people can link through to get a bit more context as to where this choice came from. And then this one is usually, this would usually then link out to, either a GitHub repo or a docs page or something like that. So yeah, it's definitely it's a starting point, it's an entry point for people to have a look at things and then links out elsewhere to kind of dig into a bit more detail if people wish to do so. So yeah, that's it. Don't think there's any more questions, but yeah, some really, really good ones there. So yeah, that's it. That's what I wanted to talk about. So thank you very much for attending. We'll be taking a break from our kind of Tech Talk series in August for the summer holidays, but we'll be back with some really exciting events in kind of September and later on in the year. So keep an eye on that. Yeah, so thank you very much, everyone, and have a good day.